We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Knowledge Share with Dr. Dave podcast. I'm Dr. Dave A. Cornelius, aka Dr. Dave, your host, 2 days in a row, I guess, which is going to be really cool to get into this conversation about lean portfolio management and generative adaptive practice. So, just wrapping up a wonderful engagement. Um, where we're working in and implementing LPM for a company that does about $5 billion in revenue every year. And so that was really what prompted me to start to think about, well, what should be the next series? What should be the next thing? So I'm really excited about this new series called Guiding Lean Portfolio Management, LPM, with Generative Leadership. This series really explores the benefits of the generative adaptive practice and how that helps to implement LPM for organization who are like really focusing on for better insights into their investments to deliver products and services to get the big bang for the buck. That's what we're after. And so we know leaders have this great fiduciary responsibility um, on how investments produce value for customers and the organization. And oftentimes you run into the status quo that says, hey, we just do annual budgeting and that's good enough. And we'll figure out, all of the goodness in terms of how we want to do our investments. So I just wanted to quickly go over the generative adaptive practices. So there are 8 tenets, and I'll just add it up to the thing. And so what we talk about is like 8 tenets that's really involved with the abundance mindset, where the leaders believe that everyone has a potential to grow and succeed. We have focus on we, which is willing and enabled. And so leaders are really trying to create an environment that allows everyone to feel valued and empowered to contribute. And the third one is that we trust you to achieve our goals. And so we believe people could do more, right? We have great trust with our people, with our teams, and we encourage them to take ownership of the work. Number 4 is like win and lose as a team. And in this practice, failure is an opportunity to find new ways to learn and grow. And so this helps to develop a mindset that embraces successes and failures. Number 5 is partner and have conversations to learn more, right? They believe everyone has something to teach and to learn. And the best way to learn is by sharing ideas and experiences. So this is some of the tenets. And number 6 is run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis. People are not afraid to experiment and take risk and gain new knowledge and experiences. 7 is what did we learn from failure to grow? And failure is an opportunity to learn and grow. And they believe to create a culture where people feel safe admitting mistakes, which is all good stuff. And number 8 is we're talking about fun and joy. Right? They believe people are more productive and engaged when having fun and really enjoying their work. So those are the great 8 tenets for the generative adaptive practice. And we try to use that. I'm using that as a way to guide our leadership to help implement LPM per se. Um, so, I have this great expert here that's hanging out with me today. He I just can't wait for him to come on. And, we have Luke Hohmann, who is from Applied Frameworks, and he's a safe fellow. So, Luke, what's going on?
Hey, Dr. Dave, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so am I. And so I always try to have fun and talk about a song or a spoken word that's inspiring you today. And some people are courageous and they hum a few songs and a few bars. Others just, provide a few words of inspiration. So I'm just going to leave that up to you.
Yeah, I will save the ears of our audience from me humming or singing. I can claim skill in many areas, but musicality is not one of them. Um, I guess I would just say it's a sunny day here in California, and I have an office with a lot of natural light, and so I'm feeling happy and sunny today.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I live in Arizona, so it's not only sunny, it's 100 and 6 degrees.
Okay, that's a little warm for me, but I get it.
Yeah. It's where we live today.
Nice.
So a 30-second elevator pitch about yourself. I could go on and on about you, but I know that you would have a succinct way of speaking about yourself. So I'll let you do that.
Well, I've been blessed to work in the Agile community since it formed way back in 2003. I helped form the first Agile conference. I've served on the board of the Agile Alliance. I've written 4 books, ranging from cognitive psychology and organizational behavior to beyond software architecture to innovation games. And now the latest book is relevant to our conversation with portfolio management, software profit streams, how to design a sustainably profitable business. I was blessed to create a company, bootstrap an enterprise software company, and then we sold that to Scaled Agile, joined Scaled Agile, worked on the framework team quite extensively in Agile product delivery and lean portfolio management competencies, was the contributed substantially to those classes, POPM, APM, and LPM for Scaled Agile. I also have a nonprofit, which I care quite a lot about, and that's everyvoiceengaged.org. And that nonprofit focuses on civic engagement and tech for good. And I think that the tech community in the world that we live in has an ability and a responsibility to create tech for good. And then my personal brand, I define as I provide positive energy to systems that need it.
I've been following you for a while, and I believe we've met at one of those conferences, over the years. But I've been following you for a while, and I love the work that you do, especially the stuff that you have going on with in the nonprofit area. Really
Thank you so
something
much.
that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I believe that our democratic practices and our democratic institutions are facing a bit of a rough patch right now.
Yep.
And we work on ways to help people find common ground and find a way to come together, which is kind of rare right now, but it doesn't have to be.
And I completely align with that. So, that's why generative leadership is such an important conversation for me in
Yeah.
terms of how do we bring our head, hearts, hands, and habits together and to really provide some great value for everyone
You
in
know
our
what I thought
community.
of when I saw your tree, Dr. Dave?
Yeah, tell
And
me.
I'll admit that's the first time I've seen the tree, and it's beautiful. I thought of 2 things. The first thing is apparently there's these new trees that are called fruit salad fruit trees, where they
Yes.
graft different parts of trees together, and you can kind of get different fruits from the same tree. And I thought that was brilliant the way you did that. And the second thing is, all of the things that you put in the roots of your tree. I have 4 kids, and I remember when I used to go to elementary school, and you'd go into like the 4th grade classroom, and you'd look at the walls, and you see all these positive statements about be nice and play nice and be positive. And I'm like, why can't we have all that positive stuff at work? And it was like I was in a very inspiring way. I thought the roots of that tree were like, yeah, you could put that in a 4th grade classroom and it'd be just right.
Oh, of course, of course. I mean, I picked up a lot of that stuff, and even though there is some theory behind of it, I picked up a lot of that stuff when I still run my program called 5 Saturdays, working with high school students, teaching them programming, agile,
Nice.
all of that goodness. So I learned that from those high school students and applied it through theory as a great practice, for us to continue to follow, because we tend to forget about these things, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we need to be reminded. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah,
It was
for sure.
good. Very inspiring.
Well, thank you so much. Hey, let's just jump into these questions.
Sure.
And
Let's bring it.
yeah, so we're going to talk about the LPM adoption roadmap, and the very first one that I want to talk about is align, right?
Okay.
And so when I think of the abundance mindset of a leader, how does this help, the organization going through this journey? Because it's hard. LPM is hard. Changing the organization is hard. Their mindset. How does an abundance mindset, help that organization to like paint this really compelling picture of what a thriving portfolio can be that benefits everyone?
let's talk about the abundance mindset, and then let's talk about what the meaning of alignment is from a cognitive psychology standpoint. First, you're right. We get into trouble at any level of the organization when we have a scarcity mindset. And scarcity mindset is, oh, I don't have enough money to do everything I want. But the abundance mindset is, I have an abundance of great ideas. It's like going back to your fruit tree. I've got an abundance of fruit. So what fruit do I want to eat, or what fruit do I want to pick? And so human imagination within organizations is unbounded. Our people can create the most amazing set of things, but human resources and the ability for an organization to pursue a given idea is bounded. We just don't have unbounded sources of capital, and nor should we, right? If when things get into an unbounded state and we're not motivated to prioritize and pick, we actually make sloppy choices. And you can see that in Silicon Valley companies. There's a phrase in Silicon Valley where I live, and I bring a lot of the Silicon Valley mindset into lean portfolio management, is you die faster of overeating than starvation.
Yeah.
And what we mean is, if you take on too much capital, you'll waste the money because you're doing things in a wasteful way. Another way to say it is, first-time founders brag about how many employees they have, and second-time founders brag about how few employees they have. Meaning, we don't expand, we don't grow. So I think the abundance mindset is important to realize that we have great employees, we've got great customers, because customers are a great source of ideas, and so we have this abundance. So our job in LPM is to make investments against that abundance and figure out through experiments and hypotheses on what's important. But to do that, we do need to align. So let's talk about alignment. One meaning of alignment is that I have an accurate mental model of the priorities of my company, but more importantly, I have an accurate mental model of the people I'm working with and their priorities, and they have an accurate mental model of mine. Meaning, Dave, if you and I were on the same portfolio team within that $5 billion company that you were talking about, chances are good that we would go into the meeting saying, okay, I know what my priorities are. How am I going to get funding for my initiatives? You're doing the same thing. And that's okay. That's what we're supposed to do as leaders. We're supposed to advocate for our initiatives. However, the organization is benefited when, as I'm in that process, I'm saying, okay, I know what my priorities are, and I have an accurate representation of Dr. Dave's priorities, and you have an accurate representation of mine. And I think that that's a step that we often miss in LPM. In that alignment step, we tend to assume that we know alignment around our priorities because we see the strategic priorities of LPM, and we assume that those strategic priorities are isomorphic to the individual business leader priorities. That's not always the case. And so we need to invest time in that alignment to say, okay, what is most important among the group? And now once I know what's important in the group, and individually and collectively, then I can go through the, how do I make investments in specific initiatives? Because I know from an abundance mindset, I'm going to have a lot of good ideas, and I am going to be resource constrained in what I can pursue.
I mean, that is brilliant. That's exactly right. I mean, I love the way you frame that out in terms of making sure there's also alignment between all of the members who are the stakeholders and having those conversations in terms of understanding what we all need and we're all seeking. That's really brilliant the way that.
Yeah, imagine you're working for that large company, and you have a belief that the strategic initiative of the company is to grow from 5 billion to 8 billion in 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, you might believe that the right way to implement that is to expand in Latin America. And I might believe that the right way to implement that is to generate new offerings for our existing large customers. Both are valid approaches to achieve the objective, but imagine that you and I are starting to discuss like which of the ideas we want to fund. I'm going to fund a very different set of ideas. not from a perspective of being right or wrong, but from a perspective that we haven't aligned. And what we need to do is we need to talk about as a team, as a business leadership team in LPM, okay, we have this objective. How do we generate alignment on how we want to achieve the objective, our expression of initiatives and work? And you might make a better case than me, and therefore I can align with you and say, you know, you're right, Dr. Dave. We should be investing 40% of our portfolio budget into expanding into Latin America. However, I still think that we should have 15% for new product development for specific North America clients. And you could say, yeah, I could support that allocation, as opposed to fighting over the allocation without realizing what the higher level goal is.
And certainly, one of the things that we run into, we're trying to do LPM implementation. Oftentimes, the leadership, at different levels, begin to feel overwhelmed, right? With this shift and this change, this new language, this new way of thinking, and so, what it's like? How does the abundance mindset, how do we leverage the strengths and the capabilities within the organization, so we can make the transition a little smoother? Because it could be very rough and bumpy, right?
It can be. I've often asked, what are the root causes of failure in adopting new practices like LPM or like some other lean agile ways of working? And most of the time, the root cause of failure is impatience from various people, or this, and in this case, it's a scarcity of time. We talk about the abundance mindset. This one is a scarcity of time. And let me give you a different example. I'm used to be a health fitness instructor, a trainer at gyms, and people would say, oh, it must be hard to work with very fit people. I'm like, no, super fit people are easy to work with. You toss them anything and they'll do it. It's more challenging to work with people who are less fit and becoming more fit, because they're changing habits and it takes time. And my rule of thumb as a trainer was, I need 1 week with you for every month that you've been unfit. So if I said to you, hey, you haven't worked out in how long? And someone was truthful with me and they said, it's really been like 4 years since I've really had a good fitness regimen with good health habits, et cetera. And I'd say, great, that's about 48 weeks. So over the next year, this is what we're going to do. And they'd be like, no, I want to get it done in 2 months. I'm like, yeah, but you won't.
Yeah.
Right? You just won't. And so with LPM, I don't want to dissuade anyone who's listening from working diligently towards the objective. But if you're not going to steer quickly a $5 billion organization, and nor should you, because there are existing practices that got you there that are successful. And I want to also bring this up about LPM. When agile people like us go into an organization and help them adopt agile practices on the technical side, many times those practices are brand new and you just hit the ground running, like, oh, wow, I didn't know what test-driven development was. And once we've learned it, we can just start using it. Or, oh, I didn't know the advantages of stable teams. I was moving people around based on project-based funding. And you adopt that and you can get some pretty quick benefits. Or I map out my continuous delivery pipeline and I realize that I don't have enough resources in my deployment arena, so I could do, say, rolling deployment.
Right.
Again, those things are very, very fast implemented. And when I mean fast, I mean, in the scale of 0 to 6 months. But LPM, by definition, a successful organization is going to have a process of portfolio management. There is a process that exists within the organization today before you do anything with them. And so what we need to do, and what I advocate, is have people map out their current portfolio process, because there's going to be some practices that are good in the sense of developing high impact results and aligned with lean agile ways of working. And there are going to be some practices that are maybe outdated compared to lean agile ways of working. And that way I can take the practices that the organization has adopted that are working and that are effective and that are aligned with where we want to go, and build on them. Because unlike a dev organization where I'm going to maybe be, in a sense, changing things more rapidly or more substantially, with portfolio management, moving into lean portfolio management, I can take a little bit more time, map out what they're doing now and say, hey, you know that monthly meeting that you have? Well, this is what you're doing in the monthly meeting. And you're looking at, status reports this way. We're going to keep that monthly meeting, but we're going to change it to this. So I keep the cadence,
Yeah.
but I improve the process.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that you try to keep in mind is that most of these companies were successful before we even introduced, lean agile ways of working. They're making money, right?
Yeah, $5 billion. You're doing something right.
Yeah, there's something right. I mean, but also part of this journey with leadership is sometimes, and at different levels, they have this fear of loss of control with LPM. And sometimes we try to frame it in terms of decision rights, right?
I would think that that's the right way to frame it. The reality is that all organizations have a certain degree of authority granted to employees, even without LPM. Years and years and years ago, I worked for electronic data systems. And when I started at EDS, it was a very low-level job. And then eventually I worked my way up to be a developer. And then I was a manager. And then I was a director. And then I was a VP. And at each level, my ability to make decisions on financial matters increased. When I was a developer, I could spend zero money, right? I had no authority. When I was a manager, I had several $1,000s, but a modest amount. By the time I was a VP, I had hundreds of thousands of dollars of authority in my decision-making process. Because I had 60 developers reporting to me, and I was responsible for hardware. It was a subsidiary of EDS that did credit card processing. So I was approving things like, tandem Cyclone mainframe computer purchases, right? So every organization already has a concept of decentralization of control. So when they hear what LPM is talking about with decentralization of control, sometimes safe people will actually do ourselves a bit of a disservice because we make it sound like a more radical change than it actually is. We're like, hey, you got to decentralize decision making. And the executives are like, what I prefer to do is I like to say, hey, look, chances are you have some degree of decision making authority already distributed. How's that working for you? Let's look at that. Because what's unspoken is that we never treat people uniformly if we care about them. Meaning, if I'm a parent, I got 4 kids, right?
Yep.
If I love my kids equally, I treat them differently. And the same is true of organizational design. If I care about the growth of the leaders within the organization, I'm going to treat them differently. And one way that I treat them differently is I have some parameters and guidelines of decentralization, but the experience level of that person is going to help guide just how much decentralization of decision-making authority am I going to give that person. And so large organizations like your 5 billion, trust me, the VP in that organization is not going to, I hope not, but they're not going to approve the purchase of a book by a given person or, some office supplies. So they've already learned how to decentralize certain decisions. So once again, instead of telling people we're going to blow up what they do, let's help them understand the nature of decentralization in SAFE and the nature of decentralization in lean portfolio management. Let's talk about how we decentralize many decisions, and certain decisions we centralize. We would never, for example, decentralize to the individual organizations picking a cloud provider, right? Anyone can pick their own cloud provider. Really? Yeah, not going to happen. Because a $5 billion organization has enough gravitas that they can go to one of the major cloud vendors, say an Amazon or Microsoft or Google or IBM or Oracle, and that organization is big enough to look at their existing investments And, I'm not trying to promote one company over another, but let's say they're a big Oracle shop. Well, at $5 billion of revenue, right, your IT spend is going to be at least 200 million, maybe more. Well, you can go to Oracle and you can start to negotiate in a way that's advantageous for your company. And so you're going to centralize decisions like what is our Uber cloud provider platform, and you're going to decentralize other decisions. And we talk about that in SAFE quite a bit, but the reality is large successful organizations already have a perspective on centralization and decentralization, and we want to support them in that process.
Certainly, certainly for sure. And as we continue in this conversation, we talk about this stage or step of a line in building trust and building buy-in with the leadership and other members of the organization. So if we think about the abundance mindset, how can we leverage that to engage members of value streams, other leaders, partners externally, to build like a strong LPM foundation?
Well, my favorite activity, and something I'm well known for in the Agile community, is participatory budgeting.
Yes.
I've been doing participatory budgeting at any possible configuration you can imagine, from large corporations making decisions on significant portfolios to cities, to schools, to nonprofits, to families, helping, my kids when they were still at home. My kids are out now, but we would do participatory budgeting for helping plan our family vacation. Like, here's our budget. And if we go to this place, we're going to consume so much in travel, which means you can't do as many activities. But if we go over here, we're going to consume far less in travel, which means you could have more in activities. How do we want to do this? And these choices on limited resources matter. And so how can an organization accomplish the goal that you just outlined, in a sense, engage more people in the organization? And of course, I'll be the first to say that we're not engaging everyone, because not everyone has the background, ability, or knowledge, experience to contribute to the decision making. Meaning, if I'm looking at my IT investment initiatives, and within a corporation, I probably want to exclude all my contractors and consultants because they might be self-interested.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to exclude people who may be just, in a sense, frontline employees, or people who are new to the organization who just don't have enough experience. But there's going to be dozens of people who I want to have involved in that decision-making process. Participatory budgeting is your best avenue to engage a large number of people within the corporation, and it provides data. Now, some organizations will do participatory budgeting where they're handing over, in a sense, budgetary authority to other people. That's a pretty progressive or pretty strong use of participatory budgeting. A much safer way and a much more comfortable way for leaders to get started with participatory budgeting is invite your managers, directors, senior directors to participate in participatory budgeting forums, but use their feedback as market research. And it's an internal market research. So, and an example, I'll give you a really concrete example. We worked with a company, bwin Party, in Europe, not well known in America, but a multi-billion-dollar gambling and gaming company. So they do like real-time sports betting, they do poker, they do casino games like roulette, all online. And in Europe, that was legal way before it was in the US. And so they have these three divisions, and we knew what the leadership wanted to fund because we did participatory budgeting with the leadership. But then we extended that and we included managers, directors, and senior directors. And then what we did was we would compare the results for the leadership team and say, this is what you think, but here's what the extended team thinks. Okay, that's interesting. So what we found was that there was a significant degree of overlap. Great. But there were a couple of differences. And sometimes the differences were that the leadership team hadn't explained the initiative well enough. And sometimes it was that the lower level people, the more feet to the street people, saw things that the leaders didn't. And by using this as a data acquisition, you're still retaining control as a leadership team, but you're giving yourself the opportunity to make more informed decisions by getting more voices engaged.
No, that's wow. That's a great experience to share in terms of how that feedback loop continually allowed the organization to grow and the leadership to become more aware of different things that's happening within their system per se. So that was really good.
Yeah, and if you even, and our data shows that even if leaders choose to fund initiatives that are not supported by the broader organization, the act of engaging them in participatory budgeting gives them insight on how to communicate that choice. Hey, look, we know everyone thought this was a good initiative. After looking at all the data, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this one. And here's why. And by what we find is that, leaders who are, say, directors or senior directors, those people are adults.
Yeah.
And they'll look at that feedback and go, oh, okay, I'm maybe a little disappointed that my initiative didn't get funded, but I can support what the choices were because I know I was heard and I know my feedback was incorporated, and I have specific feedback from the leaders on why what we thought was important was not chosen.
Yeah, I mean that really matters, understanding the why. Yeah, right. I mean that is a very foundational thing that as human beings, when we could get that, oh wow, it makes a difference between the trade-offs that you're open to accepting.
And a lot of lean portfolio management you can equate to your pair bond and your family, and I do that quite a lot. With your kids, when we're tired and they ask for something and we say no, they'll say why, and we just go because.
Yeah.
Well, that's because we're tired, and it's not a very satisfying answer for our children. And I found that I'm not at all a perfect parent for sure, but I found that my kids would work with me better when I could say, here's why, right? Dad, can I have the car till 12 tonight? No. Why? Well, it's 4th of July.
Yeah.
And there's going to be firecrackers, and it's a more dangerous night, so I'm just not comfortable. You can stay out till 11. Well, Dad, I'm admitting that I'm not comfortable, and I'm telling you why, for the reasons why, but it's not going to happen. And then the other thing is, we forget in market research, like a lot of market research is based on surveys.
Yeah.
But what we forget is our opinion of what is important is based on the opinions of others, meaning we're tribal creatures. And what we want to do in lean portfolio management is that, the value you talked about, we in the tree, when we make decisions, it's because we're a tribe. And in a tribe, the opinions of others actually influence our opinions. Like sometimes you can see leaders go, look, I don't know this area as well. These two initiatives seem about equal. Can someone in the team help me make a decision? And someone might say, well, let me advocate for this. And someone says, well, let me advocate for this. And now I'm getting educated. I'm having a conversation, and I'm learning more through the interactions. And eventually I'm going to have an opinion, including the opinion that the right thing to do is for me to give my opinion to Dave by letting Dave have my funds in participatory budgeting or something similar. So the higher level point is, when we're looking at complex initiatives and complex choices, the opinions of other people in that team, in that small tribe, actually do matter. And creating mechanisms, which LPM has many mechanisms to support that human dialogue, is incredibly important to creating better decisions.
Yeah, and not to mention the learnings that comes out of those conversations, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So when we since LPM itself, it's a change initiative, right? So, and we know change is like, it's daunting, right? And so when you think about it, how can leaders leverage the abundance mindset to break down this whole LPM implementation into, these manageable steps that we could chew and digest, so we could celebrate some wins and just keep momentum going? Because LPM, it starts off right.
Yeah, well, that's partly because the timescales of organizations are generally annual for their LPM practices or their portfolio practices, because we have annual budgeting and quarterly reporting. And especially for it's highly likely that your $5 billion client is a public company, because there's not a lot of private $5 billion revenue companies. And so there's fiduciary responsibilities, as you mentioned. There's reporting responsibilities, there's disclosure responsibilities, there's forecasting responsibilities. So that all influences how an organization is going to make decisions on LPM. My preferred process for adopting LPM is to start with the solutions that the portfolio is managing. I do recognize that SAFE says start with the value streams. And I am a SAFE fellow, so of course I'm going to support SAFE, but I adjust it a little bit. I start with the solutions, and then I work backward into the value streams, and then I work into the horizon thinking so that I can map my solutions by horizon. The reason I do that is because executives know their solutions more thoroughly than they know their value streams. And they know what those they know 3 questions for their big solutions: what the solution is, who's using it, and what is its economic impact in the company. Like those 3 things executives tend to know in their head. I know this is this solution, it's in this part of the life cycle, it makes this much money. I may or may not know if that solution in SAFE terms has an ARC comprised of 6 agile teams or 3 agile teams or 9 agile teams. I don't know the teams. I just know the other stuff. And so what I find is that some, say, less experienced agile or some less experienced SAFE consultants will come in and they'll be like, well, let's start with value streams. And then executives are like, oh, that's not how I think. And what I find to be more effective is to say, hey, look, your solutions in your portfolio. Let's just enumerate them, identify them, map them by horizon. And now let's start talking about which ones are doing well and which ones you might want to invest more in and which ones aren't. And then the other part of that is I know a lot of agile and SAFE consultants will start with how many projects do you have going, because we're moving from a project to a product mindset.
Yeah.
Well, again, a project is associated with a solution. And in SAFE terms, a project often becomes either a solution, we just recognize it as a solution, or B, we recognize it as an epic. And that epic then further decomposes into a business epic, which is associated with a solution, or an enabler epic, which often is associated with a solution or multiple solutions. So my advocacy for that quick win is to help people see their solutions as opposed to their value streams, and then start to talk about that solution mindset, which is isomorphic to the product mindset.
That's really cool, man. So, that's a really interesting way to look at it, because the book says go this way, the expert says here's a better way to do it, right?
Well, it's an alternative way. It's basically
alternative. That's
We're climbing the mountain, and
Yeah.
the book says take the east face, and I'm saying take the south face.
Yeah.
But we're going to end up at the same place.
Certainly. But as we wrap up here, what advice would you give to a leader who wants to cultivate, this abundance mindset within the whole LPM team?
Well, you mentioned something earlier, which just a few minutes ago, which I think is something that we can pull the thread on, and that is, how do you create some small wins in this journey?
Yeah.
And there's research from the organizational behaviorist Carl Weick, Weick, and he wrote a very influential paper in the 70s about social change called The Strategy of Small Wins. And it actually underpins a lot of Agile, right? I mean, if your sprint is done right, or your iteration is done right, it feels like a small win. I made a small improvement, either an increment or an iteration, but a sprint should have a kind of a happy ending. And similarly, a PI should have kind of a happy ending, right? I made something better. And so, from your standpoint, and what you said is, how do I create an abundance mindset? Well, I feel more abundant when I have a small win. And so I would look for that small win by starting by taking the LPM, and I think of it as unrolling the processes. So going back to the first step in my LPM journey is I have people draw out their LPM process. Like, what are you doing today? Then I have people tell me about their solutions, and then we start to unroll the safe practices relative to their current practices. Many times we can keep the cadence, but we change what's happening in that meeting. And many times we can start to really talk about their solutions in a way that they understand. And then we can get to the value streams, and then we can get to some other things. Because right now they are funding what we would call a value stream and safe. It may not be as clean as we like. Maybe their program board has more dependencies than we would like, but they're effectively doing that. And so rather than trying to walk up to people and say, you're not doing this and you need to, we're going to say, hey, let's look at those things that you're doing that we can enhance. And that's that small win mentality.
No, I love it. It's leveraging the principles of also positive inquiry in learning more, as opposed to blaming or demeaning people's capabilities, right? What
That's
they're
right.
doing. Hey, they're making money. We know they are. That's why we're here as consultants, right?
Right? Facts. And
Yeah.
too many, it's funny. I have consulting friends, of course, in the Bay Area, and you'll go to a cocktail parlor, and you'll hear that, like, this is what I think, so-and-so should do. This is what I think Apple should do. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think you know how to run a $1 trillion company.
No, which is a fact,
Right.
Yeah. So I want to ask you something about what do you have going on the grill? I know that's one of your fun spaces, or used to be anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I love my grilling. And that's a funny thing. So just Saturday, I'm sorry, just Sunday. So I was in Amsterdam last week, and then Saturday we flew back, and then we had some friends over for dinner on Sunday. So I grilled my tequila lime marinade steaks, which I would share. If you want me to send it to you, you can post it in the show notes.
Yeah. Send it to me. I'll
It's
be
a
happy
really
to share it.
Yeah, it's a really great steak, a quick marinade, because the lime juice will soften the steak pretty quickly. And I also grilled dried fig and pork kebabs with a balsamic glaze. And so those were the last two things I grilled. But yeah, grilling is, it's fire. And
Yeah. I remember us having. I think we had this conversation somewhere. I just can't remember where. So that's why I brought it up.
oh, what are you doing? What have you been grilling lately?
I am a pescatarian, so it's all about salmon and fish and scallops and also the different types of seafood. So
Well,
that's
scallops are pro grilling, because a lot of people will overcook a scallop on the grill. I mean, you got to be careful.
Yeah, I love using lime as well as a tool for help to cook things a little faster. So maybe you only need to put it on for about 3 minutes, and scallops are about 3 minutes, and then they're perfect.
That's right. I'm down with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next grill will be, I'm sure it's going to be salmon or some other stuff. But yeah, grilling is, it's how men cook, and I know that's very, very gender specific, and I apologize to everyone. It's how this man cooks, not how all men cook.
That's right.
Certainly, there are some great women grillers, all that kind of stuff. So I apologize for being a little cavalier with that statement.
Well, great, man. So I just want to say thank you so much for giving your time so generously today. I know you have many other things and many other options, but thank you for sharing this moment with myself, and as well as with the people that listen to my podcast. So Anything else you would like to add in terms of like plugging your book? So you can send that to me for your show notes. Anything you want to plug before we go?
Yeah, I would say that. Well, first, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for everyone who's listening for listening. I would remind everyone to remember to kind of go slow enough to be uh, sticking with the change and fast enough to create a few wins along the way. And there's a bit of a balance there. But remember that successful organizations got there through the choices they've made. And we're not here to blow them up and say, somehow you've done something wrong. We're here to say, you're doing well, but if you adopt these lean, agile ways of working, we think you can do a little better. And that's almost enough to get things going.
Great. That's great advice to share. So thanks a lot, Luke, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So I want to just say, it was just really great having this conversation with Luke today, Luke Hohmann. I've been like following him around, reading all of his stuff. It's just really a big fan of the work that he has been doing. And especially, some of the work he's been doing with First Root. I think that was one of the things that, that I really appreciated, being able to read some of those white papers. So some of the tips that I pulled up, and I was thinking about, that we should look at all of these challenging scenarios, or approach them anyway, with empathy and some level of change management to help people move along. That just remember that building trust takes time. So adapt to change gradually, small steps, incrementally. Make sure that trust is a foundation in this journey, so that when we engage the executive sponsor to open doors and advocate for us, and especially if we're not in a position of trust, we should be able to just say, can we go slowly? Can we do small increments? Strive to understand. Take time to understand the source of any of the concerns that people may bring up. So, and also just embrace an experimental mindset. Begin with small, quick wins to build trust and pave a way for future progress. Foster mutual trust. After listening to their concerns, just engage them in activities and make progress visible. So, look, as we come to an end of this enlightening conversation today, remember that an abundance mindset is not just an approach, but a transformational journey for leaders and organization to go on a journey, and especially go on a journey with LPM, with lean portfolio management. And we know as leaders, as you're trying to bring on this new way of working, it's naturally, it's going to feel overwhelmed, right? You're going to feel that there's challenges that's involved. So just take small but significant steps to a change, and you can build this great culture of trust and collaboration within your team, your peers, and also your partners. I want to bring partners up because that's really important. And we want to ultimately achieve success in this LPM implementation. So next time, and the Knowledge Shared with Dr. Dave podcast, we're going to explore some more of the generative adaptive practice, which we call focus on willing and enabled. And we are going to talk about how do we change the organization to start to thinking about how do we organize around the flow of value. And so we'll just have some different conversation with another expert, of course. I'd just like to tell you that Knowledge Shared with Dr. Dave, the podcast, is available on Spotify, Apple, Audible, and many other places where you get your podcast. Hey, check out my latest book, Generative Leadership to Thrive. And, there's a great story in that book about Ashanti Mwendo. It's a woman who's leading a tech company, which is very rare. And you can find that book on Amazon.com as Kindle, Audible, and print. And just thank you for listening. And remember, every step taken within an abundance mindset is a step towards a thriving generative organization. So thank you, and we will talk soon.
We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.